Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Channel Master if you don't know who I am. I've been missing in action for a little bit, but we'll get to that in subsequent videos. Today, I am here to speak about the Chevening interview. I feel like I'm a little late already. I know that persons are already interviewing. However, I think there are some people who have not even received their dates for interviews yet. So hopefully this will help some of you guys. I must say that I don't think I have any groundbreaking advice to give you guys. I think everything that I've said has already been said, but perhaps me sharing my experience with the Chevening interview will help you. Guys, I live near the main road and it is always noisy out, so I've been delaying doing this video and any video because of that. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is what I think are the most helpful things I did to prepare for the interview. Let me give you a little backstory. This wasn't my first time interviewing for the Chevening Scholarship. This was my third interview actually. The first time that I interviewed, I had no clue what the interview was like. I never even knew that people were practicing for the interviews and people were doing mock interviews. I went in completely blind. And the second time around, my interview was much better, but I wasn't fully convinced or confident. So the first time I was rejected. The second time around, I got a reserve candidacy. And the third time, well, I'm here. So what I can say I did between these different interviews is that I worked on my confidence. So I know that my second interview was good. It got me to a reserve spot, but I knew that I wasn't as confident as I should have been. So what I did when I knew I was going to be interviewing, instead of trying to practice or rehearse what I had written in my essays, I opted to focus on building my confidence because I noted that that was the missing ingredient for me. One of the practical ways that I worked on my confidence was that I made a list of all of the skills I had and all of the deliverables I had achieved, whether in work, whether in voluntary service, whether as a student, just all of the things that I thought were noteworthy that I had accomplished. I made a list of that. I still have that list, and it reminded me that I had indeed done the work. I was not lying about who I was. I am not an imposter, and that helped me to build my confidence. It also gave me things to reference so that my speech was a lot more fluent, and I was able to segue into different examples. So you can try that tip. You can write down all of the skills you have, all of the things that you have accomplished in your professional life, in your voluntary service. Think of all of the things that you have done that are noteworthy. It can be as simple as serving on your youth group at church or in your community. It can be serving on cleanup campaigns. And neither does it have to be tied to your career goals. Just write down everything that you've accomplished, everything that you've contributed towards that is good. That will help to show you your body of work and help build your confidence. At least that's one of the things that helped me build mine. I don't find it necessarily helpful to give you exact questions that were given because my interview questions changed and the interview format changed entirely between the first time that I interviewed and the last time that I interviewed. But something that helped me immensely and built my confidence and my fluency was that I practiced aloud. I practiced aloud with myself in the mirror. I practiced aloud with my friends, Ches, Tineve, Hannah, Gracie. These are the people that I practiced with. And none of those persons were Chevening scholars. If you have the benefit of working with a Chevening scholar, then great. But anyone who can make a judgment on whether you sound confident, on whether you're fluent or not, and whether the themes in your answers are congruent, would be able to be a good person to practice with. So, and just practicing aloud allowed me to gather my thoughts and establish a pattern of how I wanted to speak, and that helps with fluency. Sometimes you think you know what you're going to say, but because you have not said it aloud, when you try to utter it, there is that break or these pauses that you take to process. Practicing aloud helps you eliminate those pauses and helps with your fluency. So that's the second most helpful thing that I did. One other thing that I did that was very, very helpful to me was that I identified the examples I wanted to use for each question. So if you are at the interview round, you would have already written your essays, and you know that there are 4 major topics under which your essays fall and that you would have to answer questions on. There may be other questions, especially if there is someone from your field on the panel that may be directed at you, but you know you're going to answer questions on those 4 main themes. That is leadership and influence. I think the question was phrased differently this year, if I remember correctly, but the essence is leadership and influence. The second is networking, showing your networking skills. I think that question was phrased differently as well. The third is your future career plans, and the fourth is why you chose the universities that you chose and the programs that you chose at those universities. So what I did, for the leadership and influence question as well as the networking question, I identified 3 examples that I would use that showed my leadership and influence as well as my networking skills. 3 separate examples. For all of my examples, I used the STAR approach. Most persons are familiar with that approach if you're going to be doing interviews. And if you're not familiar with it, it simply means that you're going to cite your examples, giving the situation, your S, the task, the action you took, the results you achieved, and some people stop there, but some people say to go on and say the lessons you learned. So all of my 3 examples for the leadership and influence question, I tried to identify these different elements for them, and I just tried to become familiar with what I wanted to say. What were the key points that would show that I had leadership skills? What were the things that would show that I was able to network? Please identify the examples that you want to use. You may have used one example in your essay. If that is the case, try to identify 2 other examples that you can reference easily if you are asked to give other examples outside of the one that you used in your essay. You may only get the chance to speak to one example, but that's okay. It's better to be prepared than to not be prepared. My best advice on attempting the leadership question, the leadership and influence question, I think something that is super, super important is to clarify what these terms mean to you. So there are dictionary definitions, but there are also these nuances, and it's the same advice that I have for the networking question. You have to understand what networking means to you, and in so doing you would be able to identify examples that show you have those skills. For the longest time, I was very afraid of the networking question simply because I knew that I did not network the way persons in this generation understand networking. I am not great at going to a social event and schmoozing and boozing with people and taking down their numbers and making something happen. That's not what I'm great at. I'm quite introverted. So when I clarified what networking means to me, of course, not creating a whole new definition, using the definitions that exist, but clarifying what it meant to me and how I go about networking, I was able to pull examples of how I've networked in the past. And so I didn't feel like I was lying or I was making up a story. And you have to try to be succinct, but don't rush yourself. You will get a feel for the panel and whether they want you to be uber brief or they want to listen. They may ask follow-up questions if you have been super, super brief, but also try to cover all the points without them having to ask follow-up questions, because if they don't, it means you've lost your opportunity to sell yourself. And this is so strange coming from me because I hate the idea of having to sell yourself. So guys, my camera is disrespectful as usual and it was overheating, so it had to go off. Where was I? I was saying that... So I was talking about the future career plans question. The future career plans question was one of the most intimidating questions for me, simply because of my personality and my life's experiences. I'm a planner in other facets of my life, but I never plan the exact things that I am going to do. So when people ask me questions about what is my 5 year plan, that is a very intimidating, overwhelming question for me. And that translated to preparing for the interview. I felt like I was lying if I said I wanted to do specific things, because I knew that I might change my mind. A couple of the ways that I worked around that was by first, instead of saying where I wanted to work, and very specific things that I would do, I first identified the gaps in the area that I was looking to go into, and how I felt I could contribute to filling these gaps. So my area was global health and development. I noted that there were gaps in terms of policy structures in the Caribbean with respect to a number of things. I highlighted some things that I thought I could do to fill some of those gaps. I also broke down my plans into short, medium, and long-term goals. That made it more digestible for me, more approachable, and less overwhelming. So I identified things that I could do in the short term. So with respect to my short term goals, for example, they were nothing uber ambitious. They were as simple as, when I return, these are the things I'm going to do. I'm going to seek to establish connections with certain bodies. They were very, very realistic plans. I would do this. In the medium term, I hoped to work with this. I hope to work in this area. I hope to do this. And the long-term goals is where I left room for those aspirational goals, those things that seemed far off or far-fetched to me. So if you want, you can break yours down into short, medium, and long-term goals. And they don't have to be uber ambitious. Of course, you already have the material in your essays as well. So please interweave that material and just make it stronger for your interview. Do not just go to your interview and regurgitate what you wrote in your essay. You want to be able to expound a little and give a justification as to why you opted for this goal. The final tip I would give you with respect to answering your future career plans question is to make reference to the post-COVID world, and how that affects your area, if you can. At this point, COVID is still on our horizons. It is a major thing. It has disrupted a lot of industries and a lot of areas, and it's changed how we do things. So if you can make reference to working in the post-COVID world in your area, that would be great as well. Other general tips. My first other general tip is to be well rested. If you're anything like me, if you're tired, your brain does not process as quickly, and so it affects your fluency. So try to get some rest. The day before the interview, I did no practicing. I rested. I did things that were fun and other things that you've heard people say. Please try to be in an area where it is quiet. Last year, I opted not to do my interview at home because Trinidad had lockdown restrictions and everybody was home. And I noted during the earlier days of those restrictions that persons would be cutting grass at random times in the day and the neighborhood was not very quiet. So I opted to use my friend's office, which was a lot more quiet, and that helped me feel more confident that I would not be interrupted. Something else that is commonly said, but it's super important, don't overlook it, be yourself. In this last interview, I was most myself. I was very comfortable because I had done the work to build my confidence. And so I came in with my personality, which is slightly awkward, slightly jokey. I was very much myself in essence. So be yourself. Don't force anything. Don't try to answer like somebody else, which is why I did not give specific answers that I gave, because I don't want you to try to replicate exactly what I said. Be yourself. Use the language that you would normally use to answer your questions. They're not looking for a prototype. They want to see what you have to offer. You've already impressed them sufficiently to make it to that round, so be yourself. Third tip is to leave room for mishaps and plan for what you would do in the eventuality that you have those mishaps, especially if you're going to be using technology. So for me, I had 2 mishaps happen on the day of my interview. One, my headphones decided that they wanted to malfunction at the beginning of the interview, so no one could hear me, and my computer was making a very loud screeching noise on their end. So I had to leave Skype, exit the Skype app, and return, and I did not end up using my headphones. Luckily, I was in a quiet environment, so that did not matter. I had another mishap where my friend supervisor entered the office towards the end of my interview, and I was actually answering my future career plans question at the time, and I was already nervous about it. So she entered the room that I was using for the interview, and that threw me off a little bit, but I was able to gather myself and refocus and power through. And it wasn't too bad, obviously, because here I am. So guys, these are the tips that I have for the interview. If you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I will do my best to answer you in a timely manner. And I just want to wish you the very, very best with your Chevening interview. What is for you is for you, truly.
My crown so heavy, better help me carry. My crown so heavy, better help me carry. My crown so heavy, crown so heavy, my crown so heavy.